UFC 313 this weekend from Las Vegas, Nevada. Alex Pereira back under the bright lights. He defends his light heavyweight title against Magomed Ankalaev in a fight for the ages. A really, really good fight at the top of the light heavyweight division. In your co-main event, Justin Gaethje comes back for a short notice opponent. He takes on Rafael Fiziev in the co-main event. We're going to talk about those two fights and the rest of the card as well. And I'm joined by none other than Paul Browne to help me do it as well. Looking forward to it. Good to be back chatting to you too, Paul. Are you keeping well? Are you looking forward to the card?
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime Poatan fights, which seems to be every couple of months, like over the last while, it's always exciting, isn't it? He always delivers on the big stage. So, I mean, it's been quite a while since he hasn't really turned up and done his thing. So I think this is his 5th title fight in something like 16 months, which is bananas, you know. Crazy. And he's knocked out the last 4. So I mean, we're allowed to get excited for an Alex Pereira fight, so let's do it.
We sure are. Like, I mean, I talked to Sean a little bit on the big podcast this week, and we're kind of saying, you know, it's just we can kind of get caught up in the week to week fights. And, you know, one main event after the other. And sometimes, you know, it's important to take a step back and realize what you have and who you have as champion. And the rise of Alex Pereira through the middleweight ranks and the light heavyweight ranks has been nothing short of sensational, and the opportunities that he's created for himself. You know, you mentioned the title defenses. He set the record last year for 3 title defenses in the 1 year for light heavyweight. You know, he's breaking records, he's creating history, he's winning fights, and, you know, all of that accumulated, Paul, turned him into probably one of the biggest stars in the UFC right now. I mean, when you think, you know, I know what I thought of him when he first came in. I didn't think he would get this far. I didn't think he would get close to this far. It's been really sensational story for the champion coming into what is probably his biggest test at light heavyweight this Saturday.
Without a doubt, yeah. Like, this is the guy that the UFC kind of did everything they could to avoid making this matchup, and it's purely because it's not that Ankalaev isn't good enough to win the belt. The issue is that he is good enough to win the belt, and he's not a charismatic personality. You know, he doesn't have the same sort of mystique that Pereira does. So they kind of, I think they're hoping he doesn't pull it off this weekend, but he's absolutely capable of doing it. He's a really, really dangerous fighter. There's a reason his record is what it is. What is this, like 20-1 and a draw, isn't it? So he's a sensational fighter. And of course, a lot will depend on how he decides to approach this fight, and I'm sure we'll get into that. But these two guys are probably the 2 best fighters right now in that division.
Yeah, indeed they are. Like, I mean, Ankalaev, you know, has been charging up the light heavyweight rankings for quite some time now, and a lot of people said that he probably should have got this fight, and I agree with them too. A couple of fights ago, you know, it seemed to me, I wonder what your opinions on this. It was like, you know, he was somewhat punished, Paul, for that draw with Jan Blachowicz, where they vacated the title. They wanted to give it to somebody, and then nobody ended up walking home with that title. It was kind of like Dana White and the UFC brass kind of said, well, fuck this, we're going in a separate direction altogether now. I think that was when Jamal Hill kind of came in onto the scene as well, and kind of took the title. But, you know, it kind of felt a little bit unjust for Ankalaev and for Blachowicz. I mean, you know, who's fought both of these guys, and Blachowicz came close. It was to kind of hand in Alex Pereira a loss in the light heavyweight fight that they fought in, and, you know, that would have changed the path of the way that the light heavyweight title would have went. But you feel that, you know, that draw definitely came back to hinder Ankalaev. I think in somewhat unfair circumstances, to be honest.
I'd absolutely guarantee it did, yeah. Like, when you align it with the fact that he's not got, like, it's not that just that he doesn't, like, speak good English and, you know, good on camera, and in the way of a lot of superstar fighters are, you know, they're engaging and whatnot. I mean, Pereira, you never see him speaking English on camera, but, you know, he's the outlier in this situation. His unique kind of personality still shines through. You know, they manage his image and whatnot so very, very well.
It helps an awful lot when you're knocking lads dead inside the cage too, if you don't speak a lick of English. You know what I mean? Guaranteed. You let your hands do the talking, you know.
If he was a bit crap, nobody would care who he was. Yeah. Like, but he's the fact that he's knocking lads dead, and I'm sure he knows quite a decent amount of English, or, you know, he probably knows kind of more English than I know Portuguese, and like he can probably carry a conversation, is my guess. But the way he keeps that silence and just keeps that famous stone face, you know, he plays up to the gimmick. It's brilliant, you know, and everybody, you know, we all see that he's really enjoying this journey that he's on. But it all depends on him turning up and continuing to knock people out. And he's got a huge test this weekend. Whereas Ankalaev, you know, again, not really engaging on camera and things like that. But when you align that then with putting in a dud of a performance when you get a world title shot, I think both him and Blachowicz were kind of just pushed as far down the pecking order as possible after that happened, rightly or wrongly. You know, like he's clearly been better than, let's say, Khalil Roundtree, who got the most recent title shot. None of us were complaining because we knew the Khalil Roundtree fight was probably going to turn out the way it did. And Jesus, it was worth it, wasn't it? That was a great fight. But now's the time to just right those wrongs and go back to the kind of you know, the right way sportingly to do this, at the meritocracy of the sport, and get Ankalaev in there. I don't think they can kind of avoid this one any longer. It's time to make it happen, and I would guarantee the UFC are just praying that Poatan gets the job done this weekend.
Yeah, definitely from a market perspective, I can see that. And, you know, everything that's happened in the past is, you know, is now in the past. And well, we have the pleasure of looking into the future, and we're going to enjoy this. This is the two best light heavyweights, two best 205ers in the world that are going to be stepping in there. It's a good stylistic clash. They're nipping at each other a little bit outside of the cage as well. The accumulation of everything here, both these guys' stories, the matchup itself, the different kind of styles, it's really festering into what could be something special on Saturday night when both of these guys walk into the octagon, Paul, for the main event. Look, we can kind of class this your classic striker versus grappler. I think that's the easy kind of analysis for this fight. But I think when you peel back the curtain a little bit, there's a little bit more than your just classic striker versus grappling, because, you know, Alex Pereira has been like working hard with Glover Teixeira, like on his takedown defense. And maybe, you know, why has this fight not happened until now? Maybe they need a little bit more time, to gain that confidence in their grappling. For Ankalaev, as this Dagestani fighter, not too well known for his, like, you know, forward moving, kind of rugged, gritty takedown kind of stylistic kind of fighter that you would normally see out of Dagestan, which, you know, he likes to play around on the feet a little bit. Don't think he's going to have that option too much against Alex Pereira if he fights smart. But, like, I guess the question I have for you: how quickly do you expect to see a takedown in this fight, and how do you feel that Ankalaev can work his way towards that takedown? Because I think, you know, the takedown and the takedown defense is going to be a real key ingredient onto who gets the win here on Saturday night. Yeah,
I mean, stylistically, it's not a thing that we see Ankalaev doing a hell of a lot of. And I think it was Shawnee I heard on one of his, it might have been on his Q&A on the Patreon, saying something like only one of his UFC takedowns has happened out in open water. Nearly all of them have been against the cage.
10 takedowns against the fence, one in open territory. Yeah, he mentioned that in the big podcast and on the Q&A as well. And it was like, you know, that's a pretty important stat coming into this one, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes fans look at someone like a Khamzat Chimaev and assume like that's a normal sort of thing that good wrestlers should be able to do, but you just don't see people doing that. That guy is the exception to the rule. You know, he's the outlier in that respect. Like, you don't shoot takedowns in the middle of the octagon from 5 feet away from your opponent. You have to work your way in. And Ankalaev in particular, who's got 90% of his takedowns against defense, that means he has to work his way into a clinch. Now, doing that against Alex Pereira is going to be so difficult for him, because the thing that Alex Pereira does brilliantly is he fills the space between him and his opponent with the right shots, especially when he's fighting against southpaw opponents, which we've seen him. We've seen him in there with Jamal Hill. We've seen him in there with Yuri Prohachka, who switches a lot and spends a lot of time in the southpaw stance. And he's brilliant at just managing that distance. He's got a 5-inch reach advantage as well over Ankalaev. Like, they're both tall guys. I don't think there's much in difference there, but he has 5 inches in reach. And it's the way he holds his hands. Like, he keeps his guard in front of his chest rather than in front of his chin. So when they're in that opposite stance, usually, like if you and me are in our opposite stance, southpaw orthodox, we can't really jab each other. It's very difficult because our lead hand fight is just clogging up that channel, and it's difficult to get your jabs off, which makes it difficult then to get combinations going because they all come off the jab. But Pereira, because he fires from his chest, he manages to get those jabs inside, and you'll see it against Jamal Hill. He was dipping a lot and throwing the jab to the body, which was very, very effective for him. But it fills that space between you and your opponent, and you can't walk him down because you're walking straight into those shots. The calf kick, one of his best weapons, isn't there for him. He uses that a lot to kind of stop his opponents advancing, but he does use the outside calf kick to the lead leg on southpaws as well, and we saw that a lot on Yuri, and we saw it a lot on Jamal. So he's got ways and means to sort of keep you at kickboxing range, which is what he's probably one of the best fighters in the world at doing. So I see it being very, very difficult for Ankalaev to close the distance and get him against the fence. You know, it's going to be so tricky, and that's what he's going to need to do if he does want to implement his wrestling.
Yeah, it absolutely is. It's a fantastic breakdown here, and I would have similar thoughts and kind of queries myself as to how Ankalaev is going to get in there safely. One thing that I noticed that, you know, you mentioned a lot and broke down Alex Pereira's game very well. Another thing that we've seen in recent fights and a lot of other previous fights as well is that high kick, that rear leg high kick from Alex Pereira. It kind of, you know, he likes to go high, then he likes to go low with punches, and then he'll draw up that left hook. It's a beautiful setup that starts with that high kick. I question if we're going to see that in this fight, because, you know, you throw up high kicks there against a guy who wants to take you down. There's a good chance, you know, you get that leg caught. You do end up on your back. And I don't think that's a position that Alex Pereira is going to want to find himself in too much in this fight. Do you think there may be some hesitance for him to maybe fire off those? I think, you know, you can expect to see some teeps to the body, maybe some body kicks, definitely some calf kicks. I'd be curious to see if Alex Pereira does throw up that high kick, considering that there is a threat of the takedown. But you have similar concerns?
I was thinking about this yesterday, just as I was going through some of his previous fights, and I have a feeling that he might kind of go to it a bit more, to be honest, because purely because of the way Ankalaev fights. So Ankalaev fights out of that southpaw stance, and his best shot is his straight left. He's brilliant with it. So that backhand, he fires it down the pipe. He sets it up well with his jab, his hook, and straight down the pipe. That's his power punch, the one that causes damage. But if he's got right high kicks coming at him maybe every 30 seconds or so, he kind of has to be defensively responsible and keep that left hand glued to the side of his head. So that's what it can do in that opposing stance. You can use the high kick to make that person just be a little bit more hesitant to throw their power hand. So it will be interesting to me to see, does he just keep it chambered and not really take the risk, or does he really go to town on it, or just, you know, be a bit more assertive with it? So time will tell, I suppose, but I have a sneaky suspicion you might see him throw quite a few of them this weekend.
Yeah, interesting. That's an interesting thought. All right, I'm very curious to see that myself. I think
Ian Gary and Daniel Rodriguez is a really good example of that tactic, by the way, because Ian Gary did that brilliantly. D-Rod just couldn't get his jab going in the opposing stance, and then he started getting a bit gun shy with the backhand too, because Ian Gary was throwing so many high kicks. So
yeah, I might argue that if you can time that high kick correctly, though, if you're in a grappling minded kind of mindset in there, you can kind of step into that and you can hook that leg and you can use the trip to try and get Alex down on the ground. That's what I'm curious to see. Like, I mean, you know, time will tell, I guess. Let's talk about Ankalaev here. Obviously, you know, we've seen him fight majority on the feet. I think he has an unorthodox kind of striking base. I think if you're kind of just trying to compare his striking to Alex Pereira's, along with a lot of opponents that Alex Pereira has fought, it's like chalk and cheese here, Paul. So I'm curious as to, you know, we talked about the difficulties that Ankalaev may face and the problems that he does. How do you see him kind of closing that distance? What would you be telling Ankalaev going in there on Saturday night to try? Look at without a doubt, if he's talking about going in and striking with him and not doing anything else, it'd be absolutely foolish if he does that. Lots of other people have said that they're going to do that too, and we've seen how it works out for them. Like, you've got to be trying to close the distance here. You've got to try and get Alex Pereira past that tram line and at least try and get him up against the fence defending takedowns. Okay, if you can't get him down, at least if you're making him work, Paul, and you continue to make him work, you might be able to take a little bit of gas and you might be able to take a little bit of juice off those punches. Is that, I mean, that's the overall kind of opinion on how we should do it. But from a technical and an analytical standpoint, how do you see Ankalaev getting in there, closing off the cage and backing Alex Pereira up, who just loves to walk forward. It's a really difficult puzzle to figure out.
Yeah, absolutely. Because Pereira is he's a brilliant pressure fighter, like you said. And the big thing would be for Ankalaev to try to be the one on the front foot. And the best way to do that will probably be fakes and feints. You know, you're trying to get Pereira sort of chambering his shots and reacting a little bit to you,
got
rather
a level
than
change at least. You know, you got to show that you're willing to kind of try and take this fight down. I think a lot of people maybe try, and it doesn't happen for them early, and they give up on it. But I think, you see, when you want to implement that game plan, I think the key is trying to, just keep it going. It's just try and fail and try and fail and try and fail. And then maybe eventually, if you get that far, of course, into the third, fourth, and fifth rounds, you might see some success there. You think that could be the key?
Without a doubt, yeah. I mean, he could just try and play that long game and stay out of harm's way a little bit and take his moment. But it's very difficult to get Pereira on the back foot, because we saw, in the Khalil Roundtree fight, he's relentless. He's relentless, and he knows he just has that confidence that if he can just land one clean on you, you're in real trouble. It's getting past that line of vision. Like I said, Pereira fires from his chest, so you don't really want to be changing levels straight into that. It's kind of getting past that. So getting him to bring his hands up would probably be Ankalaev's best approach here this weekend. The other thing he's got to be wary of is when Pereira is firing those jabs to the chest, what he's doing there is he's causing you to start dipping your guard, and then that changes into a left hook over the top, like the one we saw him finish Jamal Hill with. So there's a lot of booby traps in that channel that you want to get into when you're trying to get a hold of him and trying to press him to the fence. So risky game. But if Ankalaev does manage to get a hold of Pereira against the fence a few times, you could see a very boring, drawn out couple of rounds while he just tries to wear on him and drain out that gas tank before really pushing for a finish late in the fight.
Yeah, like I think what you just said there, I think is a very smart way to kind of approach this fight. And I love the booby trap reference there as well. It's an excellent way to describe Pereira and his style on the feet. Just fascinating fight overall. Who are you fancying for? I don't normally like to do predictions here, but who are we fancying for this one, Paul? Who's the early money going on, or have you decided yet fully?
Yeah, actually, that reminds me of to send in me SevereMMA.
Me too. Sorry, Andy.
Yeah, we'll get around to that after this podcast. But I would be leaning towards Pereira. I don't think I'd bet against him after what I've seen him do over the last kind of 2 years. It's just been jaw-dropping. So I'd be definitely, if I were throwing money on, I'd be throwing it on him. That being said, I think Ankalaev is just an awkward customer, and I wouldn't be shocked at all if he does pull it off this weekend. But I'm going all in on Powhatan, I think.
Yeah, I think I'm a similar kind of mentality myself. I think it might be a slow and cagey round one, perhaps, while Alex Pereira is figuring out what Ankalaev wants to do. I think rounds 2, rounds 3 will be the money one. I think, if Pereira can build that confidence and stopping that takedown and landing his shots. I mean, I'm also very worried about Ankalaev's stance. He's got a really wide stance, and his leg was absolutely chewed up to pieces when he fought Jan Blachowicz. And I think, we've seen instantly in fights when Alex Pereira has landed that calf kick, just one, it can change your whole life. So I'm wondering, I think Pereira is going to come out quickly with those calf kicks and try and take away the base of Ankalaev. It'll force Ankalaev into maybe some clinch exchanges, I would think, and we might see a little bit of defending. Maybe we'll see some action on the break. But I think once Alex Pereira does build up that confidence and know that he can fend off some of the grappling attacks from Ankalaev, that's where he'll start to open up on the feet, maybe round 2 or round 3. And I think he might get him out of there then, and it'll be some story. This is the ultimate test for Alex Pereira. I mean, it really, he's created so many great stories. And already probably a UFC Hall of Famer, to be honest.
Yeah.
I know if this one, Paul, is the real feather in the cap for him, like, really, isn't it? This is
I think so.
It's kind of like the grappling test. The best guy in the division. It's not a stylistic matchup that he normally gets. So
there's nobody left after this for him in the division, is there?
No, I think we could be looking at him going up again. I honestly think that too. There's not a whole lot there, and to be honest, there's not a whole lot in the heavyweight division either, when you think about it. If he was to go up there too, I think he'd ruffle a few feathers up there as well.
Yeah, there's only the two big dogs at the top, and we don't even know if one of them is hanging around further than one more fight. So, I think if he does get through this weekend and get his hand raised, he'll have absolutely earned the right to do what Ilia Topuria is doing right now.
For sure, it'd be interesting to see if the UFC will force him to vacate the belt as well. I think that it's selective thinking on some fighters there inside the UFC, but nonetheless, we move on to the co-main event, a rematch. Paul, Justin Gaethje obviously was supposed to go in there and take on Dan Hooker. That fight fell through. Dan Hooker broke his hand just last week. Rafael Fiziev, coming fresh off of a knee injury, is coming in here at short notice for the second fight against Justin Gaethje, a fight that he just lost by the skin of his teeth the last time that they fought. Really interesting technical fight that was, Paul. I expected to see the same here in the second one.
I don't know. I have a feeling. I mean, I heard you guys talking about it on the big podcast, and Shawnee was kind of saying that he thinks Fiziev might try and just play a sensible approach in this one, and not spend everything in the first round. But I have a feeling that he might be looking at Gaethje and how old Gaethje is, and how shop worn he is, and the fact that he's coming off one of the biggest knockouts we've ever seen. And it's not like it was that long ago; like it's less than a year ago. He might look at him and think, if I hit him with some of the shots that I hit him with in round one the last time we fought, there's no way he'll be able to take it. He's not the same fighter as he was 2 years ago. So there's the chance that he approaches it that way, you know. He might be coming in there thinking, look, I took this on short notice. I don't know if I have 3 full rounds in me, but I could probably gamble a good bit here in the opening round. And then, look, if it's going against me, I can survive for a couple of rounds afterwards. He may approach it that way, but it's difficult to know. Gaethje, there's question marks over him because of that big knockout. That was anytime you see someone go face down and out cold, like we saw Roberto Soldic put that guy out at one championship the other week. Those are always the ones that make us all just kind of look a bit concerned, aren't they, when we're looking at them? So,
it was like we're shook looking at knockouts like that. I mean, I can't even imagine being on the receiving end of one, and it definitely is like a career changing kind of a knockout too. It can make you hesitant. Similar enough, I guess, to some of the circumstances that Fiziev is facing here, coming in off of a big injury as well. Is he going to be tentative? You know, you can get the feels. I know you're a guy you had knee troubles in the past. I've seen you work through a couple of rehabs as well. How much does it play an effect when you're getting back? Kind of
psychologically, yeah,
psychologically for sure, yeah.
Now I've never torn my MCL or anything like that, but I've definitely had nagging and niggling knee injuries, and I've had iffy shoulder injuries, just years of competing, and you do tend to have to take your time easing back into like hard training. So he's close to 1.5 years since the injury, the fight against Gamrot, wasn't it? So
that's right.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see what he's done, what level of intensity he's been working at. He's taken this fight on pretty short notice, like 11 days or something. So it's yeah, we'll see what he's like coming in there, but he there's question marks over both of them in that respect, I suppose. He might not be the same Fiziev that we've seen so many times in the octagon. Gaethje might be a shadow of himself, or both fighters could turn up there and just go hell for leather at each other. And I think the last time, I just rewatched the last fight a couple of times this week. It was such an excellent fight. Like,
how did you score it?
I had Gaethje winning rounds 2 and 3, but a lot, like, both of those rounds were very, very close.
Round two extremely close, if I can remember. I definitely had Fiziev round 1, Gaethje round 3, and then round 2 was the toss-up for me, I think, when I was looking at it back.
Do you know what it was? It was about 2.5 minutes into round 2. I was looking at it thinking, I'm leaning Fiziev. And then the second half of the round was more Gaethje, and it was just kind of, you're trying to weigh up which one had done the more damage, but there was very, very little in it. It was a majority decision, I think, wasn't it? I remember there being a funny scorecard. I can't remember.
I believe so. Yeah, it could have been. It was a majority decision. Yeah, so that was at UFC.
Yeah, it was close to 2 years ago.
It was, that was majority decision there. So it just kind of tells you how close that fight was. In certain ways, I kind of think that. Yeah, I think what you said at the start of this is kind of how I see this fight going. Look, when you're being off for so long, you're on a 2-fight losing skid. You're coming off a really serious injury here. You're Rafael Fiziev. you know, are you going to take a fight like this unless you truly believe that you're ready? Like, I mean, there is a sense of risk in this kind of fight, but I think Fiziev is probably coming into this fight knowing something that none of us know, including Justin Gaethje here, and it, you know, leans me to thinking about him willing to take this chances. You know, is the reps are going good, the sparring is going good. You know, he's been hunting for a fight for quite some time. Interesting to see how the weight cut goes and how much he had to get off and how much that does affect him. But I think the key for him to win this fight is to maybe dial it back 10, 20% in round one so that you have a little bit left in the tank. Because he did kind of, I was going to say, like, Fiziev fizzled out as a bit of a mouthful, but he did fizzle out in that third round. And that's what kind of did catch him in the first fight. In fact, it's a 3-round fight this time too. You know, I think we might see, you know, obviously what we were going to see was a car crash fight between Justin Gaethje and Dan Hooker. And now I think what we're going to see is a more technical savvy fight. And I'm wondering how that affects Justin Gaethje mentally too. When you're preparing yourself for a guy like Dan Hooker, who you know that's going to go in there and throw everything but the kitchen sink at you. You know, you might be coming in against the guy here now who's going to kind of maybe sit on the back foot a little bit more, try and pick his shots a little bit more. It's a little bit of an adjustment for Justin Gaethje too, and we have to give him credit for taking this fight.
Without a doubt, yeah. I think I read recently, or maybe even just been last week, he had said in an interview somewhere that he'd gotten away from his old sort of berserker style and was maybe trying to fight a bit more cerebrally over the last while. And now I think he was kind of saying in the lead up to this, he was kind of ditching that plan and trying to get back to his old self kind of thing. So that would make sense if you're going into a fight with Dan Hooker. What, like,
100%, I was going to say that too. Yeah.
Yeah. Just
whether you want to be a technical fighter or not, Dan Hooker is not going to allow you to do that. No way.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and like you said, like ripping up the game plan here now, it's a completely different game plan needed. Is he going to do that same thing? We saw the first fight, what he did very well was he kind of stayed out of the kickboxing range of Fiziev, just that little bit outside past it. And then he would like take 2-3 steps in to throw those leg kicks, like he was sprinting in, lash the kick, and then back out of danger. And he was able to do it and get them in there without getting checked. So he's got a good read on, you know, his opponent's balance. What Max Holloway caught him with big time. You remember Max Holloway broke his nose at the end of round 1 in their fight?
Yes.
With the spinning back kick.
Yeah.
So the read he got him with, and I believe after watching particularly the first round back of the Fiziev, the first fight, I think Fiziev has that same read on him. So what Gaethje does is when he throws his right hand, he really dips his head left. When he throws his left hook, he exaggeratedly throws that head to the right. And Holloway got a read on it, and that's why he was throwing the spinning back kick at waist height or at chest height. So he caught him dipping into it and smashed his nose in the dying seconds of that first round, which caused him all sorts of problems. Now, Fiziev was getting the read on it. Now, he just wasn't getting the timing right, but he throws this really nasty switch kick. And he was trying to kind of get it at the right time that Gaethje was throwing his shot so that he would be dipping into it. Now, he didn't quite pull it off. But, God, if he lands one of those, I mean, after getting knocked out like that by Holloway last year, and then you walk face first into one of those switch kicks, yeah, it could be a bad night for Gaethje.
Switch kick knockout by Rafael Fiziev. We're going back to clip this, and you'll get your flowers if that happens. I'd be straight on to you. I'd clip it myself, and I'll have it nestle in your messages for the next morning if Rafael Fiziev pulls that. Fascinating fight. Really looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Look, a little bit of a bummer Dan Hooker didn't make it. That would have been a classic fight. There'll still be time for that, but this one is a good one as well. Moving on down in the card. The next fight, Jalen Turner versus Ignacio Bahamondes in the lightweight division. Very fascinating stylistic matchup here. Two long, lanky guys in the lightweight division here. Both have power. Both have finishing ability. How do you see it going down?
I think Bahamondes, just the momentum is with him. The two fights he had last year, 2 spectacular knockouts. The second one as well, wasn't it, against Torres, when he caught him with the pull counter twice. Like, he floored him the first time, almost finished the fight, and then just kind of stepped back out and just stayed calm, stayed composed, and he allowed him to just walk back into harm's way again. Torres came running after him, and same thing, just that little step back, the straight right, and clean as a whistle on the chin. So he's clearly got that power. And then I think it was the fight before that, I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he booted the mush off him.
Giagos.
That's the one, yeah. Oh my God, such a head kick. He's
And I mean,
He
if you
just
go
looks
all the way
such,
back to Roosevelt Roberts, one of the
yeah.
knockouts of the year as well, that spinning back kick in the dying moments. I mean, he's got a good old kind of backlog of great knockouts, those Bahamondes. And I mean, that's how, early days, every time I see his name on the card, I'm looking forward to seeing him fight because I know he can pull something out of the fire. But, it has to be said, when I'm looking at his record here, obviously he has those couple of wins against Roosevelt Roberts, Rong Zhu, got a little bit of a jump up then to Ludovic Klein, failed that test, back to the drawing board again to a little bit lesser talented fighters, with all due respect. Now he's getting this chance against Jalen Turner, who has been in there with some good competition. So
is he ranked still, or is he out of them now? He was ranked, wasn't he?
I'd have to check. He was ranked, but I'm not sure. He might be hanging in around there, around 14 or 15. I don't know whether you want to check it up
rankings
yet.
Here might have me here, yeah.
But Jalen Turner, he's
sorry, go on.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, he is still ranked. He's number 13 in the rankings, so it is a great opportunity, isn't it?
Yeah, so he's defending it. He's defending his belt. He's got some good wins under his belt. Obviously, a win over Brad Riddell, win over Bobby Green. It was a good one too. His losses: Mateus Gamera, Dan Hooker, Renato Moicano. All kind of top level fights. So this fight to me, Paul, is: are we getting a changing of the guard here? Will Bahamondes, has he worked himself into a position where he can kind of take the ranking off Jalen Turner? Or is Jalen Turner going to find one of those performances again? Which, spoiler alert, I think he might. I like Bahamondes, but I also like Jalen Turner. And I think when you're in there with that good level competition, it does prepare you for fights like this. And it's a really must-win fight here for Jalen Turner as well. To kind of put himself back into the mix in the lightweight division. He hasn't had it all his own way. I'm surprised he hasn't moved up to welterweight yet, if I'm being honest. He has had some issues. I think he missed weight against Dan Hooker. He made it against King Green and also against Renato Moicano. But how much does that weight cut take out of you? He's kind of a frustrating fighter that hasn't, based off the level of skills Jalen Turner brings into the octagon, he hasn't really ticked off as much boxes as one might have thought.
Yeah, two absolute giants at the weight. I mean, both guys are like 6 foot. Are they 6'3", something like that? 6'2"?
Yeah,
they're both very big. But they're the same height anyway, and they're the two sort of biggest fighters in the lightweight
piece. Yeah,
crazy. So that's madness. But they'll both be used to being quite bigger than quite a lot bigger than their opponents. But now they're in there with each other. It's a different story. I believe Bahamondes is a very, very decorated striker before he even came into mixed martial arts, and Turner happy to stand on the feet as well and let fly from there. So it's a striking matchup. It's one I'm really, really excited to see.
Yeah, definitely a fantastic matchup and one that I'm really looking forward to seeing as well. Moving on down the card, maybe not as exciting, Paul, to be honest, if we're going to be real. Ishman Lucindo goes in there against Amanda Lemos, Brazil versus Brazil in the women's 115-pound division.
There's an age gap in that fight as well, like a 14-year age gap.
Yeah, it's kind of like I think it's not that exciting of a matchup because I know it's going to be kind of this, I think, tit for tat battle that we're probably going to go all the way. But you would liken Ishman Lucindo's style a lot to Amanda Lemos and how she kind of approaches it and stuff. So I always like to see these kind of matchups where we have two similar stylistic fighters that are going in to see how they work each other out. When you're looking at this one, you think this is going to be a change in the guard for the young Brazilian and Ishman Lucindo taking on the former title challenger in Lemos. I think there is an opportunity for her there, but it'll be very interesting to see if she can get it done.
There's one interesting wrinkle there, actually. So Lemos is 37, 38. Lucindo's only 23. Lucindo actually has more pro fights than her because she started fighting professionally at 14 years of age.
Wow. Insane.
That's wild, isn't it?
That is wild. Yes, that's crazy.
Yeah, and I believe I was listening to the Dan and Veronica Hardy while I was out for a walk earlier. I was listening to their preview show, and can't remember which one of them said it, but apparently she started fighting as a way to protect her mother and her aunt, I think, from domestic violence. Someone in the family, maybe an uncle or a dad or someone, was knocking 7 bells out of them. So that's why she took up fighting, and here she is fighting in the UFC 10 years later.
Fair play to her, former
Mad,
title
huh?
challenger. Yeah, it's mad for going in there at 23 years of age against the former title challenger. You know that you would be surprised at her age, given her fighting age is a lot more than what her natural age is, and it definitely shows in there. She doesn't cut the same cloth as maybe some other 23-year-old fighters that we see in there. Very, very schooled. Understands and is comfortable with her styles. Knows where to go. You think she has enough to get it done here, Paul? Do you think, or is it a little bit too much too soon? I think I'm fancying the Shindo on this one myself.
I was watching the two of them fight today, and I was leaning Lemos. I think physically maybe just a bit of a difference, that maybe a little bit more mature, a little bit sharper, cleaner, crisper in her strikes. But I don't think there's a whole lot between them. Do you know what I mean? And I think if she does get past her, then she's going to be hanging with the elite of the division. So maybe this one, no harm if she doesn't win it, and then has another kind of year or two to sort of peak physically and then get into it. But yeah, I mean, Lemos has fought for the title before, like you said. So if you get past her, it's onto the big dogs in the division.
That's
then
it. Be careful what you wish for in some regards, ain't it? With that, yeah. And I think Lemos. How I like in Lemos is that she's a good hammer, but she ain't a good nail. Sometimes when her back is against the wall, she does have a tendency to crumble and kind of lose her mentality inside the cage. And will the Shindo have the ability to draw that out of her? It'll be interesting to see. That's an interesting one. I'm more sold on that fight now after we talked about it and broke it down. It's an interesting one. Probably shouldn't be where it is in the card, though, truth be told.
Yeah.
Main card opener. Bobby King Green against Mauricio Ruffy. We get to see the fighting nerds back in action. Jean Silva whet the appetite a couple of weeks ago. Fantastic performance. His teammate Mauricio Ruffy coming in here for a stern test too. I think it's the trend of this card, Paul. Stern tests for people that are looking to kind of break up into the rankings or up against maybe higher level opposition. Are they ready? Will Mauricio Ruffy go in there and get the job done? I think it's not a question on if he will get the job done, in my opinion. I think it's how he will get the job done. Will he be able to find the openings to get Bobby Green out of there? Or will he kind of be frustrated into winning a fairly comfortable decision? Because if you are, and I will say, if you are Ruffy and you're wanting to get into the elite level of this division, you've got to be going out there and finishing Bobby Green, don't you?
Absolutely. I mean, Green was in the rankings until very, very recently. So he's a big test, Now he's 38 years old, and he's the type of guy that will come out there with his hands down and lean his chin forward and ask Ruffy to try and find it. So his decision making can be a bit silly sometimes, but he has the ability, if you're not on your game, to cause you real problems. But I think if Ruffy is what he says he is, then, or if he can deliver on this promise the way that you mentioned John Silva is doing it, I think King Green is going to be a big name that he can chalk off on his record this weekend.
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't agree more. Looking at the prelims, then a couple of interesting fights on the prelims. Let's start in the heavyweight division. Curtis Blades versus Rizvan Kunyev. Sean's very high on Kunyev coming into the octagon here to make his UFC debut.
He was in the PFL before, wasn't he?
He was with the PFL.
Yeah.
Did pretty well there. And I mean, the UFC matchmakers know what they're at here as well, Paul. Obviously they had him fight on the Contender Series, but he fought a couple of times on Eagle FC. Didn't do enough the first time in 2021 on the Contender Series. Is back again, and they're putting him straight in there with Curtis Blades. I mean, they're really trying to shake up this heavyweight division. We said there's an awful lot of barking and not really enough biting up in the heavyweight division right now. And a fresh meat up there might do that division a bit of favors if Kunyev can come in here and beat Curtis Blades. How do you see the fight going? Are you confident in getting it done? I feel with Curtis Blades, it's kind of the flavor of the week with Curtis. He could come in there and look like a superstar, but he can also go in there and fold pretty easily too. I'm interested to see what happens on Saturday night. What do you think goes down?
Yeah, he can be very, very unpredictable. Now, I've not seen Kunyev fight, but I mean, I'm going through his record there. He had that win over Renan Ferreira, and it was overturned because he popped for something, and win over Anthony Hamilton on the Eagle, and he has a lot of finishes, hell of a lot of finishes.
The great, they'll be talking about that in years to come. The time he popped, I think that was with the mass amount of people that popped in the light heavyweight division too. Was that famous Vegas card in 2023?
Big shout out to Will.
Poor Will.
But yeah, no, he's clearly a beast, you know. Now, if you can beat Renan Ferreira, you got to be good. So I'm interested to see, like you said, which version of Curtis Blades comes in here. Curtis Blades down on the prelims now must be a kick of the teeth for him as well, you know. He's been up there fighting on main cards and even main events, and like you mentioned, the heavyweight division just badly needs some new quality in there.
Terrible at the minute. Let's be honest, it's bad. And
there's like a lad ranked with one win, isn't there?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. You were mentioning that as well. A guy who was
a guy with the negative record was in the rankings until it was Johnny Walker's brother came in there and went 2-0 in the UFC. And
so like we do need, and I think that's the kind of skill set versus skill set. But I hear you talking at the start of the podcast about what the UFC want. Right. And I always look at fights that way too, is that when you're putting two of these guys together, what do the UFC want here? Well, the UFC want Kuniev to go out there and get the win against Curtis Blades. And then, we have a fresh name in the top 5-6 of the division that we can get a few fresh matchups here. And I hope he's one of a couple of more that to sign up, because the heavyweight division definitely needs it right now, as you said.
Yeah, without a doubt, bad, like your man Don'Tale Mays was, just come on. You look outside the top couple in those rankings and it gets quite depressing.
100%. Well, at fear of depressing you anymore, I'll rattle through the rest of this prelims card and we'll just maybe focus on one or two. We have Ray Tetsura versus Joshua Van in the 125-pound division. Fantastic fight. I'll get back to that one for sure. Bruno Ferreira versus Armen Petrosyan. Like that matchup too, to be fair. I was a little bit harsh on this prelims card. Alex Morono versus Carlos Leal. I can imagine that Carlos Leal win by decision in that fight. Chris Gutierrez versus John Castaneda. A late kind of fight that was thrust into this card. Interesting matchup. And Ozzy Diaz versus the Joren Santos in the middleweight division. Look at obviously Ray Tetsura versus Joshua Van is one that stands out there. Really good fight. Joshua Van, coming in fighting these killers in the 125-pound division. He's a really good fighter. Tetsura coming in undefeated, couple of wins there as well. That's a really interesting one, Paul, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Joshua Van's hands look really, really good. I'm interested to see how he kind of moves forward in the division over the next kind of year or two. Still very young, isn't he? Would it be 23? Yeah, so he has looked very, very good, like picking up the wins in those last two fights. What is he? 1, 2, 3 in the UFC. 1, 2, 3, 5-1 in the UFC. Yeah, and only that huge uppercut loss to Charles Johnson.
Fight that he was winning until he was losing too. And Charles Johnson is no joke in that division either. But good wins for Van against Cody Durden and Edgar Sharias bouncing back.
Third consecutive pay-per-view card that he's on as well. So they
he always brings the action. I'm not surprised to see him here. I mean, he's the perfect candidate to put on a prelims to kind of draw the crowd in for the pay-per-view card. He'll move forward. He'll throw shots. He's always in exciting fights, and he's going to get a good fight here out of Ray Tetsura as well, who's picked up a couple of wins too, and be interesting to see if he can maintain his undefeated record. But tough fight for both of these guys. I like Van. I like his style, and Joshua Van this week and maybe Jacob Truck next week fighting on the fight night card. What do you reckon?
Lovely. Lovely.
Vrum. Yeah, vrum. Anything else on the prelims there, Paul, that sticks out to you that you'd like to talk about before we wrap it up?
Bruno Ferreira and Armen Petrosyan's good, because Ferreira always has the potential to knock someone stone dead. I think he's got 100%. Quite a few first-round knockouts. And Petrosyan's no joke. I mean, I know Shara Magomedov beat him with that double back fist thing, but he was looking good in that fight, and he looks good at times in fights. He's a good Muay Thai style striker, so I think that could end up being a bit of a banger. Morono and Leal, two pretty experienced guys, two good quality fighters. Yeah, there's some decent fights there. Like I'll not that I'll be watching these live now, but I'll definitely go back and I'll catch those top 3 or 4 prelims.
I mean, are you up the north for Cage Conflict this weekend? Yeah, absolutely. Busy day on Saturday. I mean, me and Sean were going through all of the cards. We have this card, we have Cage Warriors, we have Octagon, we have KSW. I mean, it's crazy amount. I think we have KSW this weekend as well.
There is, yeah.
I don't know. Like I said to Sean, it's going to be like fucking Sports Center in my living room here. I'm going to have to break out 2 or 3 televisions. I'm normally to do the 2 televisions, and of course, when you bring out a maximum amount of televisions, you never get to truly see any of the fights. You're looking, you have your head on a swivel there. But luckily for us, and luckily for you, you'll get the kip. You'll be up on Sunday morning, I'm sure, I'm watching these fights. There'll be nothing else on by the time these fights are on Saturday night. And I'm really, really looking forward to the co-main and the main event and this card in general. It's great to have the pay-per-view back. It's great to have Alex Pereira. What I would say to everybody, enjoy it. Enjoy the wonder of Alex Pereira. Maybe it'll come to an end this weekend. Maybe it won't, but I'm going to be here for it. I'm going to be looking forward to it. And Alex Pereira is the kind of guy that, he scares the living bejesus out of me. He's a guy I'll watch always on the edge of my seat. And that's why I kind of love mixed martial arts so much in these kind of fighters. A risk taker, a forward mover, and a knockout artist. And that's what we're going to see on Saturday night when he steps in to take on Magomed Ankalaev at UFC 313 in Las Vegas. Thanks very much for joining me, Paul. Go and follow Paul at BJJ Browner. Am I right?
No, it's at Paul Browne MMA. You just I made it, put a more professional kind of look on.
You did what I did at the start to get the old MMA at the end. At Paul Browne MMA, Twitter, Instagram. Always firing up content. He's a content machine, and that's where you should be if you're into that kind of stuff. Follow me at O'Neill MMA on Twitter and the likes. We'll be tweeting out on Saturday night. Enjoy the fights, everybody, and we'll catch you again next week.
Shama.